Okay, I want you to picture something that honestly feels completely impossible. It's 1980. You're in the Soviet Union. And officially, the number of millionaires in the entire country is 0.
Right, 0. Because the state owns everything. I mean, the land, the factories, the oil, all of it.
So large-scale private wealth isn't just frowned upon, it's
illegal. It's just not a thing.
Exactly. But then you fast forward just 15 years, a blink of an eye, really.
Yeah.
And it's 1995, the Soviet Union is gone, and Russia suddenly has one of the highest concentrations of billionaires on the planet. And here's the kicker. It's the same people.
And that's the central paradox we're digging into today, isn't it? How on earth does that happen?
We're not talking about, tech geniuses inventing something new. We are talking about a specific generation of young people who went from standing in line for sausage to owning the factory that made the sausage, essentially overnight.
It's arguably the fastest, most massive transfer of wealth in human history. And the source material we're looking at today, this narrative analysis called The Architects of Ruin, it makes a really bold claim about that.
Which is?
It says this wasn't magic. And it wasn't just luck.
It was a hack.
It was a mechanism, a very specific set of psychological and economic hacks that allowed a small group of people to basically dismantle a superpower and put the pieces in their own pockets.
So today on The Deep Dive, we're doing a forensic analysis of that mechanism. We are going to figure out exactly how they pulled it off.
And to do that, we're not going to just read a dry history book. The source, The Architects of Ruin, it does something different. It traces the life of a hypothetical person.
A protagonist.
Yeah, a character born in Leningrad in 1965.
So we're going to walk in this guy's shoes. We're going to see the world through his eyes from the playground all the way to the penthouse.
Because if you really want to understand the oligarchy, you can't look at it from the top down. You have to start from the ground up. You have to understand the soil that grew these people.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's set the scene. The year is 1965. You're born in Leningrad. What does your life actually look like?
Well, it's defined by one word, really. Uniformity. You probably live in what's called a Khrushchevka.
Okay, for anyone who hasn't seen the pictures, describe that for us.
Imagine a 5-story concrete apartment block. The walls are thin, the plumbing is thin, there's no elevator, and they are just everywhere. Millions and millions of people lived in them.
Functional, not comfortable.
Exactly. And your parents, they're probably engineers or maybe factory workers. They make about 120 rubles a month.
But the key is?
The key is that your neighbor also makes 120 rubles. The doctor down the hall makes 120 rubles.
So there's no keeping up with the Joneses.
Because the Joneses have the exact same coffee table and the same set of dishes as you do. The official rule of the game is everyone is equal.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting, the source points out that while the system promised equality, the reality on the ground was shortage.
That is the gap. That's the space where the entire future oligarchy was born. See, you could have money. You could have a pocket full of rubles. That wasn't the problem.
The problem was there was nothing to buy.
Exactly. The butcher shop has no meat. The clothing store has no good jeans. You can't find spare parts for your car.
So as a kid growing up in this, you learn a lesson really fast. Cash isn't really wealth.
You learn that access is wealth. And this brings us to the first major concept in our deep dive, a word that basically explains how the Soviet Union actually ran.
Okay.
Blat.
Blat. B-L-A-T.
Now, in the West, we might translate this as, corruption or nepotism.
Yeah.
But the source argues that's way too simple.
Okay.
Blat wasn't about breaking the system. It was the only way the system actually functioned. It means favors, connections.
Give me a real-world example. I'm in that Leningrad apartment. How does blat work for me?
All right. Let's say your mother is sick and you need medicine. You go to the pharmacy, the shelves are bare. But you know a guy whose sister works at the hospital warehouse. And let's say that guy, he needs a new tire for his car. Well, it just so happens your uncle works at the auto factory. So you don't exchange money.
You swap favors.
You swap access. Your uncle loses a tire from the factory floor, and his sister finds the medicine in the warehouse.
It's a barter economy built on trust.
It's a whole web of favors. And the source emphasizes that by the time our protagonist is, say, 16 years old, he's learned the most important lesson of his life.
Which is?
That the official rules, the laws written down in Moscow, they're basically irrelevant. The real rules are about who you know.
Wow. So you're training your brain to ignore the law and just focus on the network.
Precisely. Trust was the real capital. And that mindset is so crucial because it sets the stage for the next phase. the great irony of the Komsomol.
Okay, the Komsomol. So this is the Communist Youth League.
Yes.
This is the part that always gets me. If you're an ambitious young person who wants to get ahead, maybe own things, why on earth would you join the young communists? Shouldn't you be, I don't know, avoiding them?
You would think so, wouldn't you? But the source argues that the Komsomol was, in reality, the ultimate business school for the future oligarchy.
A networking machine.
It was a networking machine. It wasn't about believing in Marx or Lenin, not for these guys. It was about ambition. Think about who was in it.
The smartest kids.
The smartest kids, the organizers, the people who wanted to be leaders.
So it was kind of like the Ivy League of the USSR, just with more red flags.
Literally, yeah. If Blatt is about who you know, the Komsomol is where you met everybody worth knowing. You were building a Rolodex of the future leaders of the country.
And then the moment comes. The mid-1980s, Gorbachev takes power. He starts perestroika.
The rules start to change. And for the first time in decades, the state allows something called cooperatives. These were like limited, small-scale, private businesses.
And who was first in line to open them?
The Komsomol leaders,
What?
the official guardians of communism, were the very first people to jump ship to capitalism because they had the connections. They knew how to get the permits.
So let's talk about what these first businesses actually were. Our source calls this part the gray zone. I've got my connections, I've got my cooperative. What am I actually doing?
Well, you're not creating value. You're not building a better mousetrap. You're extracting value. You're a middleman in a totally broken economy.
The source describes these incredibly complex barter chains.
They seem complex, but the principle was simple arbitrage. See, the Soviet economy had fixed prices. The state said a barrel of oil costs X. But on the world market, it was worth 10X.
But you couldn't just buy the oil and sell it abroad, could you?
Not officially, no. But remember Blatt and your Komsomol network. You call up a factory director, you say, hey, sign over a shipment of oil to my cooperative at the state price.
And in exchange, you promise him.
Maybe some imported VCRs, who knows? So you get the oil for almost nothing. Then you use a loophole to swap it for timber, then swap the timber for, say, a shipment of personal computers or blue jeans.
And you sell those goods to the public at a massive markup.
A massive markup. Because the state stores are empty. You're talking 300, 400, even 1,000% profit.
So by 1988, while your dad, the engineer, is still waiting in line for sugar, you're making more in a month than he makes in 10 years.
But there's a problem.
There's always a problem.
When you have that much cash, millions of dollars worth of rubles just appearing out of thin air, you have a security problem.
Right. You can't exactly put it in a savings account.
And you can't call the police if someone tries to rob you. The police, the militia, were underpaid, corrupt, and totally overwhelmed. This new economy was a mystery to them.
The security vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum. So, enter the mafia.
Now, the source is really specific here. We're not talking about the Godfather,
Yeah.
right? These aren't guys in pinstripe suit.
No. These were former athletes, boxers, wrestlers, weightlifters, and a lot of veterans from the war in Afghanistan who came home and found they had no job and no respect.
So you've got the brains, the Komsomol guys, and the brawn, the athletes and the vets.
And here's the counterintuitive insight from the source that I found fascinating. The mafia didn't just prey on business. In a really strange way, they stabilized it.
That sounds crazy. We think of organized crime as a parasite.
In a functioning state, it is. But in a collapsing state, they provided contract enforcement.
Contract enforcement.
Look, if I sell you a truck full of computers and you refuse to pay me, I can't take you to Soviet court. That court doesn't exist for this stuff. So who do I call to make sure you pay up?
You call the guys with the thick necks and the leather jacket.
Exactly. They made sure deals went through. You paid them for a roof, a cretia, and in exchange, you could operate without getting ripped off or shaken down by someone else.
It wasn't optional, but it created a set of rules.
It allowed the gray market to function.
So we've got the background. It's 1990. You've got the connections from Blatt, the network from the Komsomol, the cash from the gray market, and the protection from the mafia. You're ready.
And then the dam breaks. 1991, the Soviet Union officially collapses.
This is the moment. The flag comes down over the Kremlin. The map of the world changes.
And it is total, absolute chaos. Hyperinflation just destroys cash savings overnight.
Your life savings in a jar under the bed is suddenly worthless paper.
But our protagonist, the architect, he wasn't holding rubles.
No, he was holding assets. Warehouses, connections, foreign currency.
And this leads us to the climax of the story, the main event, the sale of the century.
Voucher privatization. I've read about this, but I feel like I never really got how it worked on the street level.
It was a desperate move by a bankrupt government. In 1992, the new Russian state owned everything. Factories, mines, oil fields, but they had no money. They needed to turn a communist economy into a capitalist one, like yesterday.
Yeah, it was the rush.
They were terrified the old guard communists would come back to power. They had to make private property irreversible. So they came up with this idea.
Let's just give the country to the people.
Sounds amazing, right? Incredibly democratic. Every single citizen, every man, woman, and child got a voucher, a literal piece of paper.
And this piece of paper represents a tiny share of the entire Soviet economy. So I'm holding a piece of a steel mill.
Basically. But this is the tragedy the source focuses on.
Yeah.
Think about your grandmother. She's lived under communism her whole life. She has no idea what a stock market is, or equity, or dividends.
All she knows is she's hungry, and the piece of paper is confusing.
Exactly. Inflation is at 2,000%.
Yeah.
The shops are empty. And some guy on the street corner is offering her a bottle of vodka or a bag of potatoes for this weird piece of paper right now.
She sells.
Of course she sells. Millions of people stood on street corners selling their birthright for groceries.
And guess who is buying?
Our protagonists, the Komsomol network. They set up kiosks on every corner. They used all that cash they'd made in the gray market, and they just bought up vouchers. Thousands of them, hundreds of thousands.
Buying the entire country for pennies on the dollar.
The source has a phrase for it that really stuck with me. Speed in a moment of confusion.
Speed in a moment of confusion.
While everyone else was stunned, just trying to figure out what was happening, these guys acted. They pooled the vouchers, went to the government auctions, and traded them for controlling stakes in massive industrial giants.
We're talking about huge oil refineries, nickel mines, factories with 50,000 employees.
Suddenly owned by a handful of guys who were still in their 20s.
It wasn't a corporate takeover, it was a heist.
But, and this is the critical part, it was a legal heist. They didn't break into the factories. They bought the vouchers from willing sellers and played by the new rules the government had just created.
Which brings us to the aftermath. The source jumps us forward to 1996, 5 years after the collapse.
And the picture is completely different. Our protagonist is not in a basement cooperative anymore. He's in a Moscow penthouse with imported Italian furniture and Swiss bank accounts.
And the guys who used to be his mafia protectors.
Now they're wearing suits and calling themselves his private security team. The whole operation is legitimized.
And the rest of the country
is in deep, deep poverty. The gap between the ultra-rich and everyone else just exploded.
So the moral question the source poses, and I think the one everyone listening is asking right now is, did they cheat?
It's so complex. If you look at it through the lens of a stable Western society, it looks like pure theft.
But the source argues that's the wrong lens. You have to look at the context of a completely collapsing system.
Exactly. They played by the only rules that existed in that exact moment. And the verdict from the source is fascinating. It says, when a system breaks, it doesn't just disappear. It redistributes.
That is a chilling thought. The wealth didn't vanish, it just moved.
It moved from the state to the very few who recognized the game had changed while everyone else was still waiting for someone to tell them the new rules. The winners were the ones who understood that fairness was off the table and speed was the only thing that mattered.
It really separates the idea of morality from the idea of awareness. You can be a good person, wait for instructions, and end up trading your future for a bag of groceries.
Or you can be aware, maybe ruthlessly aware, and you end up owning the entire grocery store chain. The source isn't asking us to like these guys. It's asking us to understand the mechanics.
It sort of demystifies them. They weren't necessarily smarter than the engineers or the doctors. They just had a totally different skill set.
They had adaptability. That is the key trait. The protagonist in this story succeeded because he flowed like water. He moved from ideology to barter, from barter to finance, from finance to ownership.
While everyone else was solid rock, and they got crushed when the earthquake hit.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening right now? I mean, we're not in 1990s Russia.
No, but the lesson here is about our assumptions of stability. We tend to think our systems, economic, political, are permanent. We assume the rules we follow today are going to apply tomorrow.
But the Soviet Union felt permanent in 1980. It was a global superpower.
And by 1992, it was a yard sale. The source challenges us to look at our own world. Are we relying on official rules that might not hold up under real stress?
It forces you to ask, what is your blat? What is your personal network of trust that survives if the big institutions fail?
Right. Do you have assets that hold real value, or are you just holding paper? It's a lesson in observation. Are you watching how the game is actually played, or just how it's supposed to be played?
It goes right back to that phrase, speed in a moment of confusion.
History isn't a smooth line. Most of the time it's a slow river, but every now and then it's a waterfall. And if you don't see it coming, you go over the edge.
And the people who built rafts beforehand, the ones with the networks, the real assets, they didn't just survive the waterfall.
They bought the river. And that is the story of the architects of ruin.
Well, we're coming to the end of this deep dive. We've gone from the cramped kitchens of Leningrad to the super yachts of the Mediterranean.
A journey fueled by shortage, trust, and pure chaos.
I want to leave the listener with this final provocative thought from the source material. It's something that's really been stuck in my head.
It's a tough question.
If you were there, born in that time, in that place, would you have been the moral person, waiting in line, hoping for fairness? Or would you have recognized that the rules of the game had fundamentally changed?
Would you have been the one buying the vouchers?
Because history doesn't just test your morality, it tests your awareness.
And as the source reminds us, the next collapse will not announce itself.
On that cheery note, thanks for listening to this deep dive. Keep your eyes open.
Stay curious.